Let's start with something strange. If you removed all the empty space from your body, you wouldn't just get smaller. You would collapse into something incredibly tiny, smaller than a grain of sand. And yet, you would still weigh exactly the same. That sounds impossible, because everything about your experience tells you the opposite. You feel solid. You can touch things, sit on a chair, lean against a wall. Nothing about that feels empty. So where does this idea come from? Why do physicists say that you are mostly empty space? To answer that, we have to zoom in, not just a little, but far beyond anything you've ever seen. Everything around you is made of atoms, not just living things. Everything. The air, the ground, your phone, your body. Atoms are the building blocks of matter. Now, when most people imagine an atom, they picture something like a tiny solar system, a nucleus in the center, with electrons orbiting around it. That picture is useful, but it's also misleading, because it makes atoms look solid. They're not. Let's scale one up. Imagine an atom the size of a football stadium. The nucleus would be a tiny marble sitting at the center, not a ball, a marble. And everything else, the entire stadium, would be empty, not a little empty, almost completely empty. The electrons don't orbit like planets. They form a kind of cloud, a region where you might find them. Not a definite position, a probability. So the size of an atom, what makes things take up space, comes from this electron cloud, not from solid material, which means your body, made of trillions of atoms, is mostly empty space held together by something else. So now the real question is, if you're mostly empty, why don't you fall through everything? Why don't your hands pass through the table? Because of forces, not contact, forces. Inside every atom are charged particles. Protons are positive, electrons are negative, and charges interact. They attract, they repel. When two atoms get close, their electrons start to interact, and something very important happens. Electrons don't like being in the same place. So as your hand approaches a wall, the electrons in your hand push against the electrons in the wall. Stronger and stronger the closer they get, until you can't go any further. That feeling of touch is not contact. It's resistance. You are being stopped by invisible electric forces. There's another rule at play here, a quantum rule called the Pauli exclusion principle. It says that certain particles, like electrons, cannot occupy the same state at the same time. In simple terms, they refuse to overlap. So when atoms get too close, nature itself pushes back hard. This is what gives matter its solidity, not because it's filled, but because it resists compression. So the world feels solid, not because it is solid, but because it won't let you pass through it. And it gets even stranger, because the particles inside atoms aren't really things in the way you imagine. At very small scales, particles behave like waves. They don't have exact positions. They exist as probabilities. So instead of saying the electron is here, physics says there's a chance you'll find it here. Reality, at its core, is not made of solid objects, but of patterns. So what are you? Not a solid structure, not a fixed object, but a dynamic system, a pattern of energy, fields, an empty space, held together by consistent laws. And this isn't unique to you. Everything in the universe works the same way. stars, planets, galaxies, all built from atoms, all mostly empty. If you could somehow remove all the empty space from every atom in your body, compressing only the nuclei together, you would shrink to something microscopic, roughly the size of a grain of sand, but your mass unchanged. All that space gone, but the stuff that makes you still there. Everything you've ever touched, every object you've ever held, every place you've ever stood is built on this same idea. The world feels full, dense, continuous, but underneath it's mostly empty space structured by invisible forces. So next time you press your hand against something, pause for a moment. You are not making contact. You are being stopped by a set of rules written into the universe itself. And the strangest part is, this empty space is the reason everything feels real.